This is Dr. Jillian Hartley, and I'm here today with Ryan Perkins. He is contributing to our Arkansas Northeastern College College History Project today. Ryan is the VP for Instruction and the Chief Academic Officer. It is November 6, 2024. Mr. Perkins, do I have your permission to record?
Absolutely, you have my permission. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited, too, because you're somebody who, you are currently the CAO of ANC, but you actually started as a student. So we're going to work our way there. But I kind of want to introduce people because this is going to be a history that they can listen to, kind of a student perspective. You were the head of the education program and also dean. But to kind of give some context, can you give us some information about when and where you were born?
Okay, I was actually born in Waterloo, Iowa. Right?
Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa. And I guess my mom and dad lived up there when they were married when I was born. I think my dad worked for John Deere. He was a machinist back in the day, tool and die, and helped, I guess, build John Deere motors. And he was really, really smart, gifted mechanically. And then, but we didn't live there long, and then we moved out of there.
So did you have any siblings? What was the makeup of your family?
Yes, I have two brothers. My brother Mark, and he's my oldest brother. He lives in Chaffee, Missouri. And then I have another brother, Chris, who's my middle brother. He lives in Cooter. And so we're not too far apart from each other.
So can you give us some information about your school, your high school? Where did you graduate?
Yeah, I graduated. I went to a lot of schools growing up, so I moved a lot. I was one of those kids that moved a lot. But around my 10th grade year, I made a decision to go live with my grandmother and my father in a little town called Morley, Missouri. It's between Benton and Sikeston, and you can't get to it from the interstate. You either have to get off at Sikeston or Benton and come back. And so, but there's a little school there. It's a little 1A school, and it was called Scott County Central. And usually when I mention that, people say, I don't know where that is, but they're actually referencing Scott City.
And I
have to correct them. No, it's not Scott City. It's Scott County Central.
Got it. And I'm familiar with that area. And it's easy to kind of get confused because of the Scott County, Scott City, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, and Scott County Central was comprised of a few little towns around there. It was Morley, Van Duzer, Haywood City, a few little towns around there that kind of all gathered there.
So you end up graduating from high school, and you do eventually come to MCCC. So can you tell us a little bit about how you went from graduating high school and how you came to be a student at Mississippi County Community College?
I graduated high school, and I went to SEMO for a semester. I just wasn't ready to go back to school yet. And so I had a cousin that lived down here, and he was like, why don't you move down here and work with me? So I moved down here to take a job at Milwaukee Electric Tool there in Blytheville. It's no longer there. Went out of business years ago. And so I was just kind of working at that job. And, every day I went in, people always told me, like, you need to go into college, you're encouraged me to go to college. And I just wasn't ready. Every kid hits their own timeline. And so I worked for a little while, and it took me a few years in the job to realize that, I do want to go back to school. You're chasing the quarter at that age, your minimum wage wasn't very much. And so you're chasing the next quarter raise or whatever, and it just kind of hit me one day like, all right, I'm not really happy in this. I do have a passion. I've always wanted to work with kids in some capacity. I didn't really know how. And so I'm just one of those guys just walked in one day off the street and said, I hear you guys have some degrees. What do you have? And I guess at some point somebody told me we had nursing, business, and education at that point. It's been years ago, and we might have had more, but that's kind of that's all I remember hearing. And I was like, well, since I wanted to work with kids, I thought education would be a good track to go into, and I just chose it and got in that path and tried to stay on it.
So you finished your 2-year education degree with MCCC.
I did.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So then how did you go on and work on your bachelor's?
So I was in a very lucky group, and I'm very thankful at that time that MCCC had the University Center. And, it was a partnership with Arkansas State University, and those instructors would drive over to our campus, or they would have us in a satellite room where they had a camera, the relic I brought today, which is probably the same one. It's probably they went through a few, I'm sure, during that time. And so that was a really great opportunity. I could not have done it without the university center that MCCC had in place. I was the guy that worked in the factory all night long, went to school all day, and there wasn't enough hours in the day to drive. One, I didn't have the financial resources to drive to Jonesboro day in and day out. And so thank goodness they had this opportunity, and me and several others became a cohort of students. We got in that program, and that's where we was able to finish out our bachelor's degree. I don't think I ever had to go to A-State.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about what the campus looked like at that time?
I could try. Like I said, I was more of a student that, I was always on the clock at the factory that I worked in. And so when I left my job, I came strictly to class, and I usually had to go straight back to work. So I didn't do a lot of time running around campus. I don't remember a lot of the buildings being there. And I try to think back, even like, obviously they had the grill and the food and all that stuff there, but I just didn't get a chance to get out very much.
What years are we talking about, just to make sure?
I was probably there 98 to 2000.
Okay.
Probably really beyond probably 2002 by the time I got my bachelor's, 2003. And I'm sure the campus grew. I just didn't get to see a lot of it just because of, I didn't have the resources to, I had to support myself. I was living on my own at that point, and I had to have a job, and I had a truck payment, and I had rent. And so when you're a college student and you have those type of financial responsibilities and nobody to depend on but yourself, you really just had to keep your nose to the grindstone and work, to say. But, I mostly remember the A building, the Solos building. I do remember the B wing and C wing, and I still walk past those classrooms today and think, I remember having a class in there. I remember having a class in that room, or upstairs in the labs. Sonia Burnett was the education coordinator at that time, so I had a lot of classes with her. But I do remember many of my courses in the rooms they were in. Really cool to walk past them and think, I was once a student sitting there in that classroom.
Well, and you eventually got a master's degree and a specialist degree, correct?
Yeah, I did, correct. Same opportunity. The University Center, wow, I mean, what a powerful tool that was for many of us. Because once I graduated my bachelor's, I went straight to work as a teacher. So I got a job immediately. Being a guy in elementary education, there weren't many of us around. And so it's one of those things where when I graduated, I had lots of opportunities, lots of jobs. I wound up in the Bootheel, and I was teaching first grade, and I loved it. I probably didn't realize how much I loved it until I got away from it, and that's kind of still true today. The farther you move away from students, the more you miss them. But I was able to. They had even the graduate program to the University Center. So once again, it was mostly through satellite, and at that point, online wasn't really. I had a few online courses, but most of us through the satellite room. And so once again, I was able to sit on that campus. I sat at ANC or MCCC. As a matter of fact, I made somebody laugh the other day. I said, I was on this campus for 6 years, and they thought I was a student working on my 2-year degree for 6 years. I'm like, no, I actually was able to get my associates, my bachelor's, and my master's right through the University Center. And that was in leadership, so I wanted to be, I thought I could affect my classroom. I thought I could affect the whole building if I go to administration. And so I did that for a number of years, and while I did that, I just kind of got in a groove of going to school, because I know you hear people say once you stop, it's hard to get going back. And so I was just in a groove, and I thought I'll go ahead and work on my specialist as soon as I finished my master's, and got that in educational leadership as well.
Well, and just for a person who maybe doesn't know the setup of a compressed video, you've talked a little bit about it, like they were there, but could you just give us like a short description of you're sitting at a desk, right?
Yeah.
How many screens are there with a teacher appearing on it?
There were probably 2 screens. I think one was there could have been 3, because I remember seeing us on the screen. So there was a camera that also showed us. And there's also a screen that showed the other class at A-State, so we could see those students as well, and we could engage one another. And then there's also a screen for the instructor.
And they could hear you, and you could hear them. And so, today we probably don't find very many of those because of online courses.
Right.
But that would have been a pretty remarkable thing for the 90s.
It was really cool. We'd walk in the room, and they weren't officially designated, but once you sit in that seat for so many years, it was kind of like that was mine. So we all sat in the same seats. We became like family. I could just remember that cohort being such a strong group of students, and even still today, they're like my sisters. If I see them, it's like we were just.
I was going to ask, like, so from that time period, from either teachers or fellow students and stuff, or anybody in particular that stands out you want to mention? And
From the college?
From any of the experience, from sure, go ahead.
Well, let's see, like, I remember my instructor, Sonia Burnett, was a big one because she was our education coordinator. So all the classes were with her. And she helped us, get set up for the praxis and helped us just in our coursework get through it. And so, but she was the main instructor and our advisor. But the two people that I think probably had the biggest influence on us in the University Center was Patsy Smith and Pat Penn. I mean, seriously, like angels. I don't know what we had done without them. They were truly advocates for us. If I had something going on financial aid across the hall that wasn't really their area, I just remember them, fighting for us and going over there. And, we were like their children. And they protected us, and they made sure we had everything that we needed. They were so good. Matter of fact, when eventually Milwaukee Tool closed and I got laid off, and they were so invested in us. I remember Patsy coming to me saying, look, I know you got laid off. You probably need the cash. Like, I've got odd jobs around my house. Like, she allowed me to work and do odd jobs to keep making money. She was just like more than the University Center coordinator. She was like our everything.
That's great.
Yeah, so we all have problems with you. She was our counselor. She was our mentor. She was the coordinator. And then Pat Penn also there, too, made sure that we had everything we need. But, yeah, you would go in that room at the University Center. You'd go into your chair. You'd sit down. There was just routine. The screen would come on. And it wasn't easy. I can remember a few of the instructors. You better be ready because they called you out by name and made you participate. So you had to really be engaged, and so. So you
go to... So you worked for a time in the Bootheel, you taught, you were a principal, but you do eventually come back to ANC. So when did you come back to ANC? And what different titles and roles have you had since coming back to ANC? Not as a student, but as an employee.
Okay, well, see, I was working in Missouri, and I was an assistant principal at Crothersville. And I assistant principal, you always have this goal that I want to be the head principal. I want to move up. And I had a chance to do that, and it was a little bit harder than being the assistant principal. You have different duties, but I tried my hand at that, and I ended up coming to Blytheville for a year, and I loved it. Blytheville was a great school system. I tell you, man, I've been in a lot of schools, and those Blytheville teachers could work circles. They didn't have a lot of schools they dismiss early, and they could get away with some things, but man, Blytheville, no. They were there Monday through Friday. PD was at night. There was no early dismissal where they could go from noon to 3. Like them people worked. And so I love that district. I love the kids. I consider myself a kid from like poverty, so I kind of understood a lot of the issues those kids had to go through on a daily basis. And so, but unfortunately, Blytheville had a reduction in force the year I came because so many kids had left and gone to like school choice. They were leaving, going to other schools, or KIPP had opened.
And the population of the county has been going down.
KIPP started growing a grade level every year. So many students began to leave that they had to cut 5 administrators. And I was one of the newest ones brought in, and the superintendent at that time, Mr. Atwell, came to me and was like, I hate to do this, but we have a reduction in force. But they kind of had plans. They had something in line for me there. It was going to be like an after-school director coordinator for the Tenaris program. You might have heard of that program. And I was going to do that. And I don't know, I got a call one day out of the blue. Danita Hicks. Love her to death. She called and she said, small chance. Would there be any chance, though, that you'd be interested in coming to work at ANC? And she didn't know my situation at the time. She's like, you probably won't take the salary cut because, administrators make decent. So going from there to what I would have been making at the college was a lot less, significantly less. But, she didn't know the situation I was in. And I was like, you know what? I think I would be interested in that. And so I came and interviewed. And
I was on that committee, too.
Oh, yeah. And so, and I never considered myself, to be an instructor at higher ed. I never thought it was a possibility. And so I got the job. And let me tell you, I loved it. That was probably some of the best 7 years of my career was being the education coordinator at ANC. Oh, I loved it.
You could take that passion for wanting to teach students, but instill it in people who were going.
I still got to teach.
Out.
My first love. I got to teach still, but also got to lead, a program. And I feel like I did a good job of building the program up. And then I did that for 7 years. And Danita retired, and I kind of didn't think I'd ever go back into administration. And so I applied, and it just so happens I became the dean. And I did that for 3 years and loved that too. I had some of the best faculty, and you're one of them. You're sitting here. You know how I felt about you, Jillian. You were one of my instructional leaders over there. It was a well-oiled machine. You're talking about just a perfect division. It really was.
Well, let me ask you a question too, because you're back at the place where you started.
Yes.
And how does that feel to be back at the place now? You are at this, well, you're a CAO now, but talking about when you were dean and over the program, but you're also at a place that gave you the opportunity to get an education.
It is. It's a sense of pride, immense pride. I feel like I'm able to give back to something that I came through and was a part of. I'll always be forever grateful to ANC for the opportunities they gave me, because like I said, the University Center college would not have been possible for me. And so, online came along and eventually allowed people to, go to college other places. But in that time, and this was it for me. It was a that or nothing. And so to be over a program that I was once a part of, that's hard to describe. It's just you feel like you're giving back, and you just want to be a cheerleader for the people in the program, like people were for me. And I gave them everything I had. I exhausted every effort for every student in that program. And I think a lot of times they weren't there for, sometimes I think some of the students I had in the day, they weren't there for, they were there to get the credential they needed for the job. But man, they came because I made them feel like they could do the impossible. I was their biggest cheerleader. I put them at the top of my list, and I did everything I could for them. And so they enjoyed coming. And I think that helped build the program. They knew I was there for them. And I did everything I could to get them through. If they had hard work schedules, if they had kids, sometimes I teach a class 4 times, and you're only getting paid for it once.
Right.
But when you have a program,
You got to keep going.
those are the things you have to do to keep numbers and to keep your students. But then to be the dean over, a division where my program fell was a great sense of pride too, because that was always my baby, the education program. So it was still great to kind of have my hand in it to help Ms. Hart, who's over there now. And when I left that job, there was only one person I had in mind for that position. It was Kim. I knew she was the one. And so we're lucky to have her there now. And
well, you've spoken a little bit about the mission of the program, and could you talk a little bit about what does it mean to the community to have an education program at Arkansas Northeastern College?
Oh, it's critical. I mean, education is so important. It's the foundation of everything that we do. And so, especially like one of our degrees was the early childhood degree, the birth, to age 5. That degree is so important, for kids. We like to say it, but I mean, I don't know if kids have equal opportunity in daycare and some of the centers that they're in. So I just had this desire I always kept that in mind. Like, we should be producing the most high quality child care providers we can provide for these kids. If you want to change a community, you educate the people in it. And so it's so critical. And I feel like we have an obligation to find teachers for our community. We have a lot of schools in our county who teachers kind of come and go, or they use maybe this particular school as a springboard to go somewhere else. They're constantly finding new teachers. It's hard on a school when in 1 year they lose 30 teachers for different reasons. They may get a start there and they finally get a job closer to home, or if they're driving for a long way. But yeah, so I feel like it's our job to help supply them with teachers. So, and recently Arkansas became one of the higher paying states in education, and so that has really, I think, boosted enrollment in that program. And we're working with some schools now on some other things. They reach out to us, and it's our job to help them. You need help passing the praxis, we'll do a boot camp for you to help you pass it. So I just feel like we're obligated to help fill those positions.
So one thing I want to ask you too, though, because when you come back, when you're a student, you talked about how you really were, you worked hard, you had a full-time job, you would come, take your classes, and you would leave. And that's understandable. Many people do that. But so you come back when you work there. What are some of the things that you could talk about that had changed? Any new buildings and changes that maybe you would have noticed more from an employee's perspective?
It's a tough one. Like I said, I mentioned when I was a student there, I didn't get out a whole lot, but and I don't remember a lot of the buildings being there. But when I came back after years of being involved in the schools, I came back and I realized how big the nursing program had gotten at that point. I don't remember it being that big when I was there. It was really education was really, I think, one of the bigger programs we had. And so to come back and to kind of see other programs kind of take the lead, like the nursing and the industry, had become such a big driving force. And so that was kind of different. I don't remember. I know I had a class over there, but I don't remember in State House Hall. I guess was probably fairly new at that time.
And there was, I don't know if you took Fitness for Life or the equivalent thereof, but once upon a time there was a Moore Center downtown you had to go to.
Across from the library.
When you came back, the Wellness Center was probably there.
Was the Wellness Center there? Yeah, I remember taking Fitness for Life was across from the library in that little center there with Coach Tyre. And, and I thought it was going to be in those classes where I'd show up and it'd be a pretty easy gig, but I got to give it, though, Coach Tyre, man. He worked us. We had to go in and we lifted weights and we walked, and it was a fun time, but a great class still. Yeah.
I can tell you, I'm with you because I had him too. And there's still things that pop in my head from my health class. So you have had a pretty long career at this point, just in education in general, both early childhood and then obviously college. So what are some of the things as far as teaching methods, curriculum, academic standards that you can talk about that have evolved over past decade, maybe the last 2 decades? What stands out to you?
Oh, let's see. When I was in education, No Child Left Behind was the bigger act that came through, and so there was just such an emphasis on reading and just getting kids ready for the test. Teach to the test was always something so big. Your school was judged based on that end-of-year test, and when I was a principal, I was all about that. The test results, and we kind of talked to that. But then there just became this, really now there's this big shift into, and it's like that with data, everything just, I think back in the day we used to kind of teach from the gut what we knew based on our experiences and our expertise, but then it just became, technology brought in data tools and assessment, and it just became so driven and so focused in that area. And so, but then, my whole career I tried to, just engagement was just a big thing I think I saw get pushed, but I think in the older days it was pretty common to come to class and the teacher lectured and you sat in your little desk all day and you did your thing, and there just became this big push of, learning with your whole body, cooperative education, sensory, and just, I started to see a lot of that and use a lot of that in my career. I rarely did something where it was just me talking. Even in my college classes, it was that way. At the end of every lesson, I think, what am I doing versus what they're doing? And so I always kind of used that when I planned a lesson. And so I kind of work backwards, like, put them in groups, let them talk, let them engage one another. And no matter what age you are, I think everybody kind of likes that a little bit. So I hope I've answered that question.
No, you did. And you're also somebody who, you had access early on to ASU through technology.
Yes.
How do you think technology has impacted higher education in more recent years?
Yeah, I don't know how you would do it without it, just online courses are just so popular now. And then we used to have students on campus, but with COVID came, I don't know if we'll see that as much anymore. And so it just drove us farther into online learning, and people have gotten used to that. And so technology is involved just about in everything that we do. We can try to resist it, but I embrace it. I used to tell students, bring your phone to class. Yeah. Like, we'll research on them. We'll put you in groups, and I always thought it was good to use instead of
telling them they can't have it.
Yeah. I would say, I'd even tell them in an email before class, bring your phones tonight. I got topics. You guys will research together. You'll do a project. And they just seem to enjoy that more.
Yeah.
And they enjoyed class more. They left like they got really good training rather than they came to a class. It was like, this is something that it was fun to come to. When you have classes, like in a program, I had my own program, education. If you don't do something, those people, they were working all day, and they're dealing with kids, and they have their own lives outside of there. So they're putting an 8-hour workday. So by the time I got them at 4 o'clock, they're exhausted. They have other things in their mind. They're thinking, supper, I got to get baths, I got to get my kids ready for school, homework. And so if you want a program to survive, and I realized kind of quick, because it wasn't this way when I got to ANC. Most of my classes were all in the daytime. So that is kind of interesting. I didn't answer that. I guess I thought about that, but when I first got to ANC, everything I taught was in the daytime. And then there just became this gradual shift of they're not coming. They're not coming anymore. What's happening to them? So I had to either move everything to 4 o'clock or put it online. And when I did that, that gave them the flexibility they needed. So,
which is great.
But online, it's hard to teach online. An online course is not easy to do, so.
It's not. It comes with a lot of challenges.
It does. How do you
you
still
don't
relay
really
this
know until
information?
you've done it.
Yes, yeah, and to do it right.
Right.
To put in all the best practices of online instruction. Yeah, it does take some work, but had I done that, I don't know what would happen to my students. They can't come, like that, especially if they're working and they got kids. And I had a lot of, single mothers in my program, that I just had to meet them where they were, meet their needs. And so
you've talked about, you mentioned Anita Hicks, you mentioned Patsy Smith and Pat Penn, and you've mentioned Coach Tyre, and you mentioned Sonia Burnett. Is there anybody else that you can think of that that kind of stands out to you, whether for that student or coming back and that move back to the campus, who maybe, because you do eventually decide to move into the dean position. So is there any kind of influences that you haven't, or anybody you would like to just kind of give a shout out to before we move into that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of the people that taught there when I was a student there were there. So when I came back as dean, I even tried to think, who was my instructor for this or that, and I really can't even remember hardly any instructors that I had, until I got maybe the education program. There was a guy named Terry Gabrielson. He was a retired principal that taught a few of our courses, and there were some of the most interesting courses I ever had. He didn't have a book or anything to class. He just came to class with a list of things he wanted to cover, and it was practical hands-on ideas. And that's what he covered every day, like have a screwdriver. You never know when a screw might fall out of your desk, and all of a sudden your class is in chaos because somebody fell out, and you can't. It's like just basic common sense stuff. And I thought it was funny and cool. I didn't probably realize how good that information was until I actually became a teacher, and all the things he taught us were probably true. Laura Yarborough was there. She helped me a lot with financial aid. I spent a lot of time kind of in that office because, I think at that time you could take out student loans was something, and so I probably took out a few of those, and I just didn't venture out too much outside of that education program. The students were my support group. My family, Whitney McKay, who's a teacher at Steele. I had Stacy Shelton, who's a teacher at Manila. She's a librarian. And we were just really good support group, like brothers and sisters, and that's kind of how we made it through. And that sounds bad, like I'm trying to give a shout to other people, but the people I interacted with are no longer probably there.
Yeah.
So,
well, okay, so you moved from the classroom to the position of dean, and of course now you're the CAO of the institution. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from the classroom to the dean position? What was it like to oversee the arts and sciences? Was it for 4 years, right?
3 years.
3 years,
okay.
Yeah. Just, give a little bit of background for that division and,
okay.
and the people who are,
I can't take any credit for the arts and sciences success. That was all Danita. Danita she left me in such good shape. She did a good job of, it used to be humanities and math and science, and she did a good job of merging all that. She built a unity over there. It was just a great division to inherit. I didn't realize how good it was, because I stayed in my education office. Everybody walked by my office, and I talked to everybody. But you're in your own silo. But to go from education to dean, I really missed the students. I'm so glad they still kind of let me teach a class or two at that point, because that's really what just keeps the fire going. The students.
So what is the purpose of arts and sciences? So what are most students there for?
Oh, they're there to get, their general education requirements. we have a couple degrees that are focused like on business, and so I had to learn those degrees a little bit. I didn't advise those, so that was a little bit of a challenge coming in and knowing how to advise the business. Advising to me is one of the funnest parts of the job. Like, I loved advising.
And because in that division, it's mostly the stuff that transfers
Yes.
and then goes to other institutions,
Yes.
then pick up and do bachelor's. Now, let me ask you a question too, because technically, when you were over arts and sciences, you were also over the university center, correct?
I was.
So
Yeah.
does that not seem like it came like full circle?
It did, yeah. I kind of inherited that whenever I became the dean. I can't remember who did it before. I guess Robin Singleton
I think so.
did. There's somebody I left off. Robin was always a big help for me with assessment. Carol Mills. So now the names are coming to me. Carol, Robin. Yeah. But I'm sorry, what was that question again on that one?
Well, I was looking at being back over the university center.
the university
to
center, yeah.
maybe talk a little bit about how much different it was from like the time you were there to then now you're overseeing it.
Yeah, I'm sure back in the day it was a lot more work than what it is now, because students actually came in there to register, and they helped make your schedules. And like I said, they were your everything. But now when I took the university center, it was more or less, articulations had been made. We had colleges we had agreements with, and I did help develop a few of those agreements whenever I became dean. I was new to that, and so instead of sitting down with other people in academic positions from other colleges and to work through the process, we'll take this, we'll take that. And you're aligning those degrees up. That was kind of cool. It helped you learn about the ACTS, Gen Ed courses and those type of things. So that was really good training. That probably did help me more than I realized, being a university center coordinator. And so you're seeing other degrees from other colleges, what transfers. And so that was kind of cool. I developed an agreement with WGU while I was in that position, an online college. And that's something our students need. They don't have the time or the means to drive anywhere else. So they need things online. And so I think that was important. So it's probably a big change is finding more schools that are 100% online. And I think right now Dustin Kemper is the university center coordinator, and he's working with a school right now, Southern New Hampshire, to try to get some articulations going with them. And I think that's something the students want and need. And we're actually meeting with CMO tomorrow on our education program. So it's active. But it's not like, I can remember going to University Center when I was there, and there'd just be people lined up in Patsy's office. They all needed her. But now it's like, you don't really typically see a whole lot of students at University Center. They may ask you, where do you go to register? Where do you do these things? But, anything they do, they pretty much get online. Students are pretty savvy now about getting online and finding applications. And if they come in, it's usually to ask us, what do y'all have with who? But they don't really need us to hold their hand anymore through the process,
Right.
So
they can do a lot of the forms and things, and usually somebody there will contact them.
Yeah.
And so this is a very serious question, because you were the dean of a college division during the COVID outbreak.
Yeah.
And this is going to be one of those things that forever people look back on, and how it impacted so many aspects of our society, but especially education. So, how do you think it affected the educational environment? And do you have any opinions about whether or not campuses, not just ANC, but all around the country, will ever return to normal?
ANC was a challenge because, one, I came into being the dean as that was happening. I was hoping to learn a little more. Like, Danita was retiring, and I was coming in, but we shut down. And so I was never able to sit down with her and I knew about budgets and schedules and those things from just being an administrator in my previous years and evaluations. But, specifically to ANC, we have our own way of doing things. And that kind of hurt me a little bit that I wasn't able to actually sit down with the person leaving the position. She helped me all she could. Danita's always a great lady, so she's always willing to help. And so that was a challenge. And then just trying to work from home, and you're trying to communicate with so many faculty on a daily basis and students, and doing that from a computer. Like, it's okay to do it for a little while, but man, at some point it gets old doing that every day. And so you miss the interaction of people, and sometimes you can't convey what you want to in an email, but students coming back, I don't know, we went in this weird direction where we slingshotted into giving students so many options at ANC, and we was called the multimodal. So I had to try to help with that. I wasn't really involved in the creation of it, but trying to create schedules and things for students that were multimodal, and we had these options out there. But it didn't turn out the way I think we wanted. I think most students just chose the online option, and for some classes that was great. A lot of you guys carried on, but there were some disciplines that didn't fare so well. I'm a kind of guy that, I struggle with, algebra, math, and so students, I think, thought they could do these things online, but they weren't maybe strong in that area, and they probably needed more face-to-face, and so but they had the option, and so that's kind of what they chose, and then, will they come back? I don't know. I've been kind of waiting to see. Some days you think they are, like today out on the grill, and it's packed, and those are the days that I love to see, but also at the same time, we've kind of given them this nice little, I think maybe we found a common ground now with the hybrid. I get it. Because my students would come to me a lot of times when I was an education major, I can't take this course, I take that course, it's live, it's middle of the day, I can't take it. What do? They're working, they can't be fired from their job to come to college. And so with hybrid, it gives them a little more flexibility. Instead of coming 2 days of class, they can come one and do the rest of it online or so. I think we found a nice little common ground, and I think it'll grow. Well, we didn't start off with a whole lot of hybrid, but it'll probably grow. And
I don't know about you, but when I was an undergrad, there was a tendency, like if you miss class, your instructor might say, try to get the notes from somebody. I think we now kind of, most faculty are aware that if you have somebody who misses class, and let's say you have a video for it, you can just go ahead and it's okay to just say, oh, well, here's a video that you can watch versus, you're on your own.
COVID, it did slingshot us, but not almost bad. It helped us gain some tools. I think it helped us realize that we can still deliver a quality product to our students that's flexible to them. So I think it did do some good things too. It wasn't all bad, right? So,
right. So you've been the CAO now. Is it for?
This is my first year still.
This is your first year.
Actually, November. Probably last week would have been my 1 year anniversary. I didn't celebrate though.
So, the CAO is an extremely important role. There's a lot of challenges facing, higher ed. And so can you provide some commentary on some of the challenges that institutions are kind of facing in higher ed right now, as well as some of the more positive aspects of overseeing faculty across campus?
As dean, I only had to worry about my 13, 14 people. And so, and that's still something I struggle with. I was just so tied to the arts and sciences. Those are my people that sometimes I forget. You have two other divisions that you also are involved in too. And so, but that was just my forte. I got good at the arts and sciences. So I'm not, I understand it, but to say I'm an expert in allied health accreditations and things like that, that would be a story to say I am. So. But I've really learned a lot about the Allied Technologies division this first year. I feel like that's the division that really required a lot more of my attention the first year. And so I got to know their degrees, and it really is important. Like before, as dean, I didn't know those plans. I never had to look at an Allied Tech degree plan. And now I can almost talk it. I can almost tell you the courses and all the degrees. And so you get really savvy at knowing all the plans pretty quickly.
The big picture, like the whole...
Yes, the big picture, yeah.
So with that in mind, when you look at not only Arkansas Northeastern College, but just community colleges in general, what do you see? What do you envision for the future of community colleges?
Well, that's a tough question, Jillian. What do I envision? Growth, I think a steady... our gen ed. We cannot let go of that. So many people rely on us for our general education. It's just critical. And you see that from an early age, like our early college partners. We have 500 high school students now that are relying on us to give them their concurrent credit. And so I just see that being something that I'm not going to say we have to fight for. I don't think it's going away. I mean, that's just something people have to have it. Students are looking to transfer. So that's a big piece, is to grow that, keep it strong. And then also understand, too, that industry is a driving force. I've never sat in any of those meetings before, and this year I've sat through many of those meetings with a lot of our industry partners, and I realize that they have a lot of needs, and they rely on us to give them the resources and training for their people. And so just finding a good mix, not letting one outweigh the other. We, as a community college, it's our duty and job to be everything to everyone almost in the community. So.
Well, with the innovative reputation that ANC has, do you see us being able to continue to evolve and meet the needs of students and the community?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Like I said, the early college has grown so much just in my time there. We started off with just a couple hundred. It was 300, then it was 400, now it's 500, and we seem to be picking up schools. We're up to 24 schools now. And so I think that's going to keep us strong. I think students are going to always need those classes, your gen ed, your history, your English, and your math. And so, I think that'll continue.
So this is a question kind of going back to, let's say, 20-year-old Ryan. You start off in working in a career, and decide to come back to college and go to college. Mm-hmm. Pursue a career in education. So
20-year-old man.
Here you are, all these years later.
Yeah.
Close to probably 30 years later, getting there. So when looking at a younger person today who's a little unsure of their path and what they want to do, or they may be thinking of something but wondering if they can actually get a job, what sort of advice, sort of looking back over all of these years, would you give to somebody who, let's say, is 19 or 20 today?
Yeah, man, my 19 and 20-year-old self, I was probably listening to Hootie and the Blowfish. I don't know. Well, I would tell those students today, I think when I was in college, like when I was a 19-year-old, I never thought about like a community college. It was, all you heard was university. You have to go to university. And nowadays I would tell kids college is college. If you go to college for a semester and you get a credential that's going to lead to a job and wages, that is college. Or if you want to go for a year or 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, find something that you enjoy doing. After a while, everything's going to seem like a job. So find something that you really like, that you have a passion for. And, don't let anybody influence you. Don't let, if your friends are, that was kind of my thing. I always felt like I got left behind. My friends were going off to other places, and I felt like, oh man, they're leaving me. I had to do this too. And you don't, just find your own way. Find what's best for you, your financial situation, for your parents. Don't let people influence you and make you feel like you have to go to, 3 states over to get the college experience. It exists right here in our community, right here in our town. And so I tell kids all the time, they still don't know what all we do. I saw a kid in the game room the other day and telling him about a new degree we're going to be starting here hopefully soon, industrial maintenance. He's a mechanical kid. I mean, just super mechanical. The other day I was at somebody's house and he was trying to pull a Jeep. He's a 16-year-old kid. He's pulling a Jeep out of a motor out of a Jeep and trying to put it into the other Jeep. And it didn't fit. So he's having to weld brackets, line hoses that don't match. And I'm like, this is a mechanical little kid who would benefit for something like this, So I was able to tell him, we got some good stuff out here, and it really piqued his interest, So
yeah, Ryan, you're just such a passionate person, and you are such you're a person who is very easy to talk to, but you care, and you have that wonderful combination mixed with hard work.
Well,
and so it's been a pleasure to interview you today. Do you have any final thoughts you would like to share for the historical record?
Oh, just ANC. We hear it all the time. We say it saves lives, it changes lives, but it really, really does. I think I look at my own story and I think of where I would be without this college. And that's not a generic statement. I don't know where I would be. College wasn't on my radar. I just don't know what I'd done without ANC. It was right here in my hometown. I didn't have to drive very far. I didn't have to expend a lot of money on gas, and that thing's getting other places. And then I found my niche when I got here. I loved the students. We became like family. And so ANC really did change my life for the better. And here I still am. That's what's so cool. As I start off a student, And I'm still here. My name's on the wall out there on the thing, so I'm an alumni. And I've just kind of moved up the ranks, and I'm just forever grateful for the college. They gave me not only a chance to find a good career that I love, but to come back and work and give back to the community and something I was so passionate about. So.
Well, I can tell you that I know your students appreciate everything you've done, and as someone who's worked for you, I know that I'm one among many people who appreciate your leadership.
Well, listen, you know this. You set the bar in classes, Jillian. I always tried to model my classes after you, so I think highly of you as well. And I always tried to. You're an instructional leader, and so I've always known that, and I've always told you that, and so you set the bar pretty high yourself. So
well, that
don't
means
sell
a lot.
yourself short. So.
That means a lot, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you.